two managers that get spoken about a lot, Zerbi and Postecoglou. They are playing each other this weekend, but we want to talk about who is actually doing a better job. So we're going to have a look at 3 criteria to decide who is doing the better job right now. We'll talk about when they took over. We're going to talk about the recruitment of both managers, and then in terms of improving players as well. I think this is going to be a good one, so get comfy. Okay, Harry, you've got to take the bias away. Just dust that off for a second, please. Harry's an Arsenal fan. Ange Postecoglou. In terms of what they sort of came into when they took over, I would say the first point goes to Ange, because Zerbi stepped into Graham Potter's shoes, and if you remember, it was right at the start of the season. They were doing brilliantly anyway, beating Man United, scoring lots of goals, and so he came into quite a settled ship. Ange Postecoglou came into a Tottenham side at incredible depths. Have you been surprised by how good they've been this year?
Yeah, I have. I've been surprised by how he's been able to implement a completely new style of football based, on what they had in their previous 2 bosses and make it work so quickly. So he deserves immense credit for that. I still think Spurs have their defensive vulnerabilities. I think their style of play allows teams space in certain areas, and I think against the very best opponents, they're still going to fall short. But it's a project, and he's got off to a great start. And there's a lot to be said for the feel-good factor that he's created. And I think he's set a really good foundation to build on. Even if they don't make the Champions League this year, which I think they might, but even if they don't, he's still laid that foundation, and he's still put them in a great position to leap forward from.
I do think with Zerbi, although, yes, he came in and Potter left, there was a feeling when Potter left that, how are you going to do what Potter's just done? Because Potter had created a new feeling around Brighton. We almost started taking Brighton as a serious team in the Premier League. That if they
and it was a bit of a shaky start, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Zerbi didn't win it straight away.
He changed the philosophy completely. Obviously, Ange has also changed the philosophy, but Potter's football and Zerbi's football, albeit we sit and watch similar things and go, it's great football. Zerbi has an exact stamp and an exact style in it. And if you went and looked at a goal Brighton scored, they probably scored the same goal 100 times over, whereas Potter's did have a bit more flexibility. In truth, actually, they just got into the box and missed every chance they had. But I think Zerbi's definitely made them more clinical. But Ange's this Spurs team were finished.
Because I think the thing to remember here is obviously that Tottenham are in the Champions League places at the moment. For Brighton, a little bit way off that. They seem a bit more, mercurial in terms of conceding goals and scoring goals. But in terms of the machine, I think the machine that Zerbi came into was a much better and well-running machine. In terms of squads, for Tottenham to be as far ahead of Brighton, and maybe it's in the sort of, in hindsight, it looks better because you're able to sell these guys and go, oh, well, look, they had Caicedo. Caicedo wasn't Caicedo 18 months ago, if that makes sense. Do you think that Ange has been able to work with a better squad than Brighton's squad?
Yeah. I think it's you
got
to remember.
Without Kane.
I think you got to remember it's Tottenham Hotspur Football Club versus Brighton Football Club, and there's a big difference in terms of the size of the clubs, the resources that the clubs have available. All of Brighton's resources are self-generated, and there are going to be times where they can't go and do certain deals because they're reliant upon the money that they generate from selling people. Ange Postecoglou has inherited some good players. Heung-min Son up there with the best forwards in the Premier League. Solid players like Ben Davies. He's a solid Premier League player. Like, there's been some good recruitment.
Sorry, Welshmen are being really annoyed there. I like Ben Davies.
There's been some good recruitment as well, but like Bissouma was there, Kulusevski, Bentancur. There's some really good players at Tottenham Hotspur, and I think to say that, that for me personally, De Zerbi's done just as well. Like, you can't sit there and say that it's Ange Postecoglou by any clear distance, because I think the circumstances he's working in are really, really different.
I think I would suggest that the squad overall, in terms of a sort of greatest ever squad that De Zerbi's had to use, that squad is close to Tottenham's, I would say. The problem you've got for De Zerbi is that you lose the player, Trossard goes, and then, and they've had some injuries this year. They have brought in some, exciting players as well, which moves us on to the second part of it, I guess. In terms of the first one, I would go, in terms of when they took over, I think Ange has had a harder hand to sort of deal with, so I'd give him that point. Would you give it? Yep.
I'd give it to De Zerbi.
Giving it to Zerbi, okay. So 2-1, so we'll give that to Postecoglou. Second one is recruitment then. So, again, I guess for De Zerbi, he's more of a sort of head coach than dealing with some of those other aspects of it. Have you been impressed with the recruitment for Ange? Because he had a difficult hand from that point of view, losing Kane, but I guess you've got a few players you can bring in.
I mean, we've seen Spurs spend 100 million terribly before.
And some of these names could have been, they were odd names. Timo Werner, players like Van der Ven, we didn't know a huge amount about. I
think it's what's strange is prior to this season, generally Spurs' transfer policy hasn't been great, and they've typically, and obviously that comes to Conte and Jose, but they've typically bought players and it hasn't worked out. Whereas Ange just come in, he bought Maddison, which was a great deal, straight off I think that was his first sign, or one of his first ones. Then Mickey van der Ven, Destiny Udogie, Vicario. Already,
he might have already been there, Udogie, but he's obviously got a tune out of him.
Yeah, so then you've got there's 2 or 3 players there that, when we were picking our team of the seasons, you were going, there's too many Spurs players in there. But that is credit to Ange and his recruitment and how he's got a song out of these players. There is another topic, we'll come to that, but I think recruitment-wise, Ange has got pretty good shout on this one, I think.
Yeah, I would give this one to Ange in terms of the players he's brought in. You mentioned Maddison, Van der Ven's been great. Vicario, the goalkeeper, as well, another really, really good signing. And he's got a tune out of a lot of good players. But I go back to the point of, at Tottenham, the level is different. Like, your best player at Tottenham will always be at a higher level than your best player at Brighton. Heung-min Son is a world-class player.
I smell a combined 11. I think it would be interesting to see
Heung-min Son is one of the top forwards in world football. Brighton don't have a player and wouldn't be able to attract a player of that level.
I hear that, but then I think if you look at the top end of it, yes. But then I think as it trickles down, Brighton definitely have the middle pack. So you've got the best player in the world, between the two teams, is Son. Then you've probably got Maddison. But then as you get further down, you go, well, actually, players like Pascal Gross, I'd have him in my midfield if we were combining the two teams.
Well, and these, I think the other thing to say is that these players then go off to the big teams.
Yeah, but I think that's right to a point. But then I think you're skipping out the layer of Bentancur, Kulusevski. That layer for me is still better than what Brighton can ever bring in, and that's the problem with this debate. That's where I'm finding it a little bit difficult, because you're talking about two clubs that operate on different planets.
Yeah, I get that. I think the one thing I would say for De Zerbi in terms of the recruitment, he has to just deal with the players that come in. But so it's almost for me, I'd almost give it to De Zerbi, but as a point, not to him, but to the club as a whole, because they come in. But if you don't have a good manager to get the best out of them, then you don't see what Matoma could be, or you don't see what Adingra has become as well. And or João Pedro, I think he scored so many goals this year. It's outrageous. I'd give that one to De Zerbi. So you're giving that one to Ange.
I'll give that one to Ange.
I'm going to give it to Ange.
And so Ange's 2 up already. But actually, if we all work it round, both of us got it even. Just enjoy the chat, don't worry. Improving players is the last one. This is very close. Because, De Zerbi has made a lot of money for the football club. But Ange has taken a group of players that were... Say something like, let's use a Brighton player. Symeou at Tottenham was kind of finished, wasn't he? Or certainly struggled under Conte. And Postecoglou's come in and sorted him out. He sorted Richarlison out. He's done brilliantly.
The one thing for me is it comes to that level again. I think that Richarlison, you could see he had another gear in him. But then players like Solly March, honestly, I think he had 4 goals before De Zerbi arrived in his entire time in the Premier League. I think he doubled that in the first 20 games under De Zerbi. Players like that, the level he's taken them to, we're going, he could get 100 million move somewhere. Pascal Gross, he's always been an outstanding footballer. But the stat in front of me here, last full season at Brighton, Gross averaged 4.41 shot creating actions per 90. He's now on 5.04. He's already on an incredible number. But there's players like that. There's also Lewis Dunk, who I think has often been linked to the big sides. He's redeveloped his game. Estupinian as well. There's a lot of players in that Brighton side where I go, De Zerbi's had a big effect on these guys.
Yeah, I'd give this one to De Zerbi because, as you mentioned, there are so many examples of players that have gone up to a whole nother level and beyond the levels that Graham Potter could ever get out of them. And that's why, when I hear people sort of making that comparison, I don't think there is one. I think De Zerbi's taken Brighton to a whole new place. For Tottenham, I think a lot of the players that they signed that we looked at as maybe previously being flops, Richarlison, Bissouma, I think it was not as simple as, because that would be discrediting Ange Postecoglou, but I think a lot of that has been playing to their strengths rather than improving them on an individual level. He's looked at what he's got and he's gone, if we tweak it this way, then I can get the best out of you. Doesn't necessarily mean that those players have gone on to a whole new level. We knew Richarlison was good, we knew Bissouma was good, but now they're playing in a system that is much better suited to them.
Yeah, I think, it's got to be De Zerbi for me as well. I think he makes such a great point. I think in terms of no names to turning them into assets that bring in hundreds of millions of pounds for a club. De Zerbi's
the assets that Spurs will probably end up buying.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. So I think he makes that. Now the point system has been a farce. Let's be honest. But so as an overall answer, who is doing a better job?
I'm gonna say Ange, but I think the thing about Brighton is, right, Brighton will win one game in 4, and you might have watched 2 of those on TV and they played well in both. The other 2 games you pay no attention to. Spurs will play 4 games, 1 win in 4, but you know about all 4 games in the full context because it's Spurs. Right. So I think Ange is performing under a higher expectation and doing very well. And yes, you said, I do agree, De Zerbi's done a lot better than Potter, but he's taken Brighton from 9th to 8th. So it's only one place. I'm going to go Ange.
I'm going to go De Zerbi. Taking the bias aside, there's none of that, I promise you. I just think that we've got a bigger sample size on De Zerbi to look at as well. And just had half a season, as well as Spurs are playing at the moment. And, he's done brilliantly to get them to that point. I just think that De Zerbi, I get what you're saying, that he's taken them from like 9th to 8th. But now he's got European football as well, which I don't think people maybe anticipated would cause them some issues. And it has. And they've managed to manage it to a point where they're still in a very respectable position. When I look at the 2 clubs, I think they're worlds apart. And so for us to be even having this conversation means that De Zerbi's done an excellent job, and so I've got to give it to him.
Good sales pitch, I can't lie.
I think it's actually it's a really good debate. It's a really, really good debate because I think the depths of where Tottenham were, to change that around so quickly is amazing. At the same time, we are talking about Brighton, supposedly this year, having a bad season. That's madness. Yeah. Like they are, and they can thump anyone. They can thump and have, whilst De Zerbi's been there. He's also, you've got Guardiola getting inspired by them. They're scoring so many goals. The stats are absolutely amazing for them as well. Over 2 goals scored per game. That gives us all hope. That is amazing stuff. So I'm going to give it to De Zerbi as well. But who do you think? Who's doing a better job, De Zerbi or Postecoglou?